Welcome back, ladies and men and non-binary friends, to the AHA, the AHA. I have recently, and by recently I mean in the last 8 seconds, dubbed this Ask Hunter Anything. It is the monthly Patreon Q&A, for which you submit questions, I provide answers. Technically, what do you eat for breakfast? Soylent, partially invisible, means it's very low calorie. What's your most embarrassing young adult story? Whatever it is, it's probably buried deeply under mountains of shame. There's one that pops into my head, and I think I told this one recently, but I was arrested for throwing light bulbs into a dumpster, light bulbs that were already in said dumpster, but were unbroken. And I was like, this is a perfect scenario. Those things are trash. I want to make a boom. So I took them out and I threw them back in. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Teenage, young, youth fun. Called the cops. They put handcuffs on me. And I'm like, hello? This was already trash. I wasn't even taking the trash. I'll put the trash right back in the trash can. Can you tell us a positive story about your life in Texas? Oh, sure. When I was making art, for the better part of a decade, the gallery scene in the area that I was in, I mean, not in the immediate area, but it's like within range. Because Texas is just spread out. Like everything is, you want to go down the street, that's a 30-minute drive. Just that grocery store, that's just like, 5 houses down. Those 5 houses are spread across like 10 miles. It's going to take you a hot minute. The gallery scene was really interesting. There's, anytime you're dealing with like art or academia or whatever, people are going to be all like highfalutin and pretentious. And I certainly have quite a bit of pretense of my own. But the gallery scene, down there was pretty good. It felt generally welcoming. Most people that I talked to were kind of just friendly more than judgmental. Again, you always have those people showing up, no matter what you're doing. Internet culture, Twitch streaming, gaming, art, doesn't matter. Somebody's gonna come in and be like, "Hold on, this isn't good. Oh, you're a fan of video games? Name every pixel." No, stay over there. Please don't be near me. You might be contagious. It was invigorating, the welcoming kind of nature, I think. It made me feel like belonging was there and that I was a part of that. And then it made it really easy to do the same thing, for other people. When, I felt really welcomed into this community, like doing a group gallery show or something. We'd, have somebody else new that would come in every once in a while. It was a lot of times it was like a lot of the same people, a lot of the same circles, similar art or similar level of career where you'd kind of essentially be grouped together. You'd still keep finding yourselves at the same, gatherings and parties and gallery shows and, have the, works hung right next to each other. So, some other new person would come in and I felt like doing the exact same thing in return. It was like, oh, this is just part of the culture. Like our social brains are like, this is how things work. So they'd come in and I'd be like, hey, look at your art. High five. This is great. Look at you. How long you been making all day? Well, look at you. All right. Rocking it. Doesn't really matter what the answers are. It's like, yeah, let's celebrate whatever this is, whoever you are, whatever you're doing. I don't have as much experience with that in other areas, but from my understanding, and certainly with talking to people over the many years and reading plenty of stuff, watching a lot of, like interviews and whatnot, it seems like that can be hit or miss. Sometimes, New York City art scene in one spot can be like awesome. In another one, it's just like everybody is just like weird and catty and just gossiping about each other, just like BS. I don't know. This is an off-ramp. Goodbye. Hello? What kind of question is this? My favorite kind. Off-ramps. I've been talking about off-ramps so much lately. It's like you go on this journey and you, for whatever reason, you're just like, you're not necessarily like, I like driving. This is a metaphor. You're not like, I like driving. You're just like, this is what I'm doing. I'm driving. So what do you do when you drive? You keep driving. And then you never find that off-ramp. It's like if I'm trying to end a stream and I'm like, I just need to find an off-ramp because this game is a never-ending, like perpetual, like I just want to keep doing it. And there's always stuff that I, can keep doing. So it just keeps drawing me back in over and over and over again. And I'm like, yeah, I probably got to go and get some food. And, but this one quest to turn in is like right over there. And let's go do that. Let's go do that thing. They gave me another quest. Ooh, that does give me that one thing that I've been waiting to get for quite a while. Okay, let me do this thing. And then if the games are built to be really engaging, they're not meant to be boring where you can easily go like, oh, this is a great stopping point. I can't wait to leave it. So it's like find the off-ramp. Where do I get off of this like loop of a highway that I keep finding myself on? That's true for so many things, for conversational topics. You're like start to tell a story, and then if you're like me, you find 8 other mini stories to tell along the way, and then when you're done with the original story, you loop back around to why it matters for that third story that you told, and then that turns into a whole thing about how some other experience in your life like shaped who you are and why you say things the way you do, and so on and so forth. This now, what I'm doing is one of those journeys. And as a streamer, it's great to not have an off-ramp when you need to keep going, but that can be incredibly unproductive. There's this interesting thing in this conversation, kind of related to, this wasn't even a question, and this is what I'm doing. This is an interesting thing related to like Jenna Marbles doing this whole, she's done a bunch of art videos, it's just like, hey, I found this really cool thing that I wanted to try out, using string and dipping it in the paint and like, putting paint on the palette and then, or putting paint on the board and then dipping this one in a different paint and then slapping it on there and dragging it across, or like, ooh, let's try some, acrylic pour or, spin art stuff or whatever it happens to be. So, some interesting technique. So the thing that really caught my attention was, there's Jenna and then there's Julian. And Julian is always described as having this Aries energy, which is like super like chaotic and all over the place and unpredictable and uncontrollable. And it's just like some random thing is happening. And it's just like, whoa! And this is all at like the volume is at 11 all the time. And then you have, Jenna with this like Virgo energy where she's like, I have a structure, I have a plan, I have this sequence of things that I want to do. Now, of course, I'm personally not buying into the whole astrology thing, but it is fascinating to see these like descriptions of like, this is what I mean when I say this term, like the Aries energy is that. And looking at Julie, and I'm like, you have absolutely nailed what this term is that you're telling me it is. So these are like this dichotomy, these two completely different kinds of energy levels. With all these videos, you see it constantly. And when we got into like some of the art stuff, I was watching some of these videos, there was like a weird kind of inversion. Not exactly, but Julian doesn't have like, with a lot of the wild stuff that Julian does, Julian doesn't have an off-ramp. Julian's just, this is what's happening now. This is all we're doing is just this chaotic stuff. Jenna's usually like, I have these exact things that I want to do, and then this is the stopping point. This is when we call it, stop recording, go to edit the video. This concludes the project. And Julian's like, let's just go until we drop, until we're like, the world tells us we're done. And even then, we'll just keep going anyway. We do whatever we want, whenever we want, just boom, boom, making the art, some of the art stuff. Julian would get in there and go like, okay, I'm going to use this color. There we go. And then I'm going to drop this thing on there. Boom, drag this string off, and that just looks great. I think I'm done. And it was like, wait. Who are you? And then Jenna Marbles would go in there and be like, okay, I think I'm going to use this, and I really want to use this other color. Okay, and there we go. And ooh, that's so good. And, oh, God, that's really good. But you know what? I think I want to add this other thing in there, too. And then like, oh, no, I messed it up. Oh, no, what do I do? Okay, I gotta save it now, so let's go back to that original color and try and put that back on again and do that other thing. Oh, this is getting so much worse, but I have to fix it, and then like, okay, well, let's do this thing. Ooh, that looks sick! I am so into this, but considering how cool that is, I kind of want to keep going with it. And what she ended up describing was how the art making felt so good, even though there were like all these difficulties in there. It was like, you did this really awesome thing, so then of course you want to keep having that feeling. So of course you do more of that thing. But when you add just more and more to art, something's gonna get gross looking and just like not function well. And then you want to fix that, and then maybe you do fix that, and even if you don't fix that, you still kind of want to keep going on that journey, because you're like, I felt those amazing feelings, and I want those amazing feelings back, and I broke it, so let me fix it because I want those amazing feelings. This is where the off-ramp comes in, and I'm gonna find one for this non-question. The off-ramp is knowing when to call it, and be like, this is good. Am I satisfied with having a good, product to my process here? I should be, and it's a learning journey by itself. I have still not figured this out, which is apparent case in point right here. I just have a journey and keep going. It's an arrow that points in that direction and always goes there. It's sort of like a horse with a carrot on a stick. You know that whole idea? It's like the carrot stays over there and the horse just like keeps going, keeps walking, because they're like, oh, I'm going to get to that carrot. I'm going to get to that carrot. Every step, no closer to the carrot. So you just keep going and going and going and going and Energizer Bunny, and it is non-stop. And that is the journey that I take. How do? Well, let me tell you about that. Why am I allowed to ask a question? You know what? You don't need nobody's permission. You are the one who gives permission. You are the decider. You are the commander of your own life and your own speech and your own question and commentary. I'm on the receiving end and I love it, but you just do you. How is your moss terrarium going? I would show you, but it kind of looks like hot garbage because there's this like interesting quality that I think everybody's familiar with in a different context of like I have it in a glass bowl, which looks really cool. And when I'm just like walking around and looking at it, I'm like, oh, that looks great. When I try and take a picture of it or something, or like if I tried to show it here on camera, all the times that I water it, there's like water that gets up on the side of the glass. And the water that gets on the side of the glass, well, there's, various other chemicals in the water. Just with any water, unless you get the one droplet of totally pure water in the world. Otherwise it's got minerals in it or, any number of other things. And so you like spritz it on there, watering the moss. And eventually, you get little water droplets that sit on the side. And as the water, the H2O itself evaporates, the stuff that doesn't evaporate gets left behind. And those are the heavier bits in there, like the minerals, like other stuff from the earth that comes up in the water, because most of the water that we make use of is drawn from the earth, not just dropping from the sky, which is kind of where you're going to get like closer to pure-ish water, right? So it's got the spots, right? And that's the whole thing with like, right? Actually, kind of a case in point for that one too is like the whole idea of, you wash your car, and then, of course, it rains later on that day. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is that it puts little spots on there. So some of the reason that kind of stuff happens is there's dust on, in this case, on the glass, or dust that collects on your car, too, from just being in the world. And then when the water hits, it doesn't necessarily just wash it off. It kind of collects it and puts it into the little droplets, and then the water evaporates, and then you have a pile of dust that was otherwise kind of spread out over, diffused over an area, so that you end up with this like really unappealing, look. And you just have to accept it because that's just how the world works. Like, you're not going to get the perfection of all the things. So I've got a lot of spots around in the glass. I never notice them until I go to show people, right? If I'm like, oh, this looks so pretty and I'm so happy with this, so I want to, take a picture and put it up on Instagram or whatever. And then I go take a picture and I'm like, I cannot edit this to look good. This is impossible. I just have to, this is just for me now. The answer to the question is, it's going pretty well. I have that one plant in there that I keep talking about that it drifted in, a seed drifted in from when I had the terrarium outside all the time. It's not really, it's just like a little glass, bowl. It's a really cute, thick glass bowl that I've got a bunch of rocks in there and the mosses. So I was just keeping it outside, and it would get the sun and it would get the rain, and I didn't have to do any upkeep. Last spring, this is like all kinds of, all the plants are making whoopee and producing the seeds, and some seed floated up in there and landed and lodged and started growing, and now it's like this whole little mini bush, and it was this complete fluke. Like, I didn't do that, but I was like, you know what, let's keep it, let's see what happens, let's see what this is all about. Now, the hazard to that, much like with having anything in your home and having other living organisms in there too, is this safe for the other creatures? And I have cats, and I was like, well, I mean, I'm not going to be like feeding it to them. I'm not going to be like rubbing it on them, and I'll just like put it over here so it's out of the way from the cats, and this should not be much of a problem. Turns out it's totally a problem. Saga is just on a spiritual level just attracted to this plant. Whatever this plant is, she goes in there and demolishes it. Now, through that fluke accident of like, I didn't think that the cat would want to go in and like go out of her way to make it to this plant where I have like put it, not where cats can easily get it, goes out of her way to like go chew on that plant. I woke up one day and I was like, oh my God, it's missing all the leaves. It's dead. What's it? Saga had chewed off all the leaves of the plant and then was totally fine. Thank Jesus. So she has done this now several times. That plant keeps growing back all of its leaves into this like little mini bush. And then, I wake up one day and I see Saga on any given day of the month, and I see Saga in there going like every time Saga has gone in to chew off the leaves, this plant like doubles in size. So it's actually kind of working. It's kind of working out. So I have this like little mesh dome that I put on top of it to try and protect it. But when I do that, I usually forget to water the moss, which I like to water every day. It keeps it nice and fresh and green. And the moss dries out, but moss is kind of magic. So I just like spritz it for a few days in a row, and it's back going like, yeah, baby, life is great. It's going pretty okay. My pine tree, on the other hand, it might not be dead yet, but I'm pretty sure it's got like 8 to 9 feet in the grave. I had to repot it, and it was super root bound, which I didn't know. And it had started to get like new green, growth going on in there. And I was like, uh-oh, if I don't repot it now, then I have to wait until like next year or like, for the fall. And then it might get even more root bound. And I'm pretty sure it's root bound in there in the first place, which means that it's like got like all the roots are just like tightly packed and like really dense in there. And it's not particularly healthy for the plant. And also, the longer that goes, the more packed in that gets, and the harder it is to transplant it into a bigger pot or into a different pot. For me, I was aiming for bonsai, so I wanted it in this different, like, shaped pot that's like really thin, to have that kind of particular aesthetic, but also some growing conditions and whatever, and like change out the soil. That was a big one too, because it was in just like dirt, which is fine if you're just like growing a tree. But you also want to have like a particular amount of like air and a certain coarseness. And this was the huge one though. The real big one that was like the reason you need to swap it out. The original one that was in had no drainage. So you water it and the water just sits in the bottom, which causes root rot, which is wicked bad. And then it's really hard to like manage the water levels and so I had to switch it out. And I was like, okay, if I don't do it now, because it's got those little new growths, I'm gonna have to wait so long. So I just like went in there and committed and did the job. And it was brutal because of how tightly packed it was. Most of the fine little roots got torn off, but those fine little roots just so happen to be the very ones you want to keep because they have the biggest surface area. Normally you think like, oh, you keep the big roots. Those seem important, The size of the root identifies how important it is to the plant. That can be true in some circumstances, but those big roots are the ones that have the least surface area compared to tons of little ones, right? It's like all the way around each one of those little roots, like the whole surface of it can soak up some water and bring it up to the plant. But that one big root, it might look like it's got a lot going on, but it is totally outperformed by just several of the small ones. Because that big root, all that inside spot that's like the, you know, the meat of the root, that's not doing any of the absorbing job. It's the outside part, right? So it's like many small ones outperform one big one. The one big one was the only one that was stuck around. It was so tightly packed when I started getting the dirt off. The little ones started crumbling out with it. Oh my God, I was so mad and sad. Oh, so I've been trying to water it a lot, and it's just not working well. Because you also don't want to do it when it's like starting to sprout new growth, because it's like, hey, I need all this water to grow. But I had that difficulty of like, well, it's starting the new growth, but if I don't do it now, it's going to take a long time, and it's already starting to show some signs of that like root rot from overwatering stuff. Anyway, let me find an off-ramp. That was about the moss terrarium. This is who I am. This is where we are. What are some things you always have with you? I almost always have at least a knife and a lighter. I also wear my shoes a lot inside, which is a big no-no for a lot of people. So quite a few people don't even wear socks. My feet get cold real easy, and I always leave my windows open, which is also dumb because my feet love to sweat. Like, what kind of fucking sense does any of this make? Like, my feet get cold all the time, but then if I even just like wear a little bit of something, my feet are like, hold on, I'm too hot, and I'm like, make up your goddamn mind. Why do we see advertisements for microwaves? What are your thoughts on the Mandela effect? Let me Google. Bottom line, the Mandela effect is an unusual phenomenon where a large group of people remember something differently than how it occurred. Conspiracy theorists believe this is a proof of an alternate universe. While many doctors, what is this, healthline.com? While many doctors use it as an illustration of how imperfect memory can be sometimes. You know, okay, so there's some interesting qualities that come into this. And this is just cursory surface thing, right? Like things that pop into my head because this is happening. Because of just what I've read, right? So you have these like larger scale, like intersubjective confirmations of bias or alterations of assumptions or recollections based on, in my opinion, at least to some extent, this evolutionary need that we have, you know, that's now baked into us. This is for very good reason. This evolutionary need for like social acceptance and way beyond acceptance. I think that's like a really small kind of surface quality. But like the social acceptance, but also being a part of the group and taking on the rules and the kinds of the qualities of the group of which you are a part. This is incredibly important in a lot of ways in terms of like evolutionary psychology and just, you know, a standard kind of Darwinian evolution. If you are part of like a, you know, let's say, you know, 700,000 years ago, you're part of a group and you're just the odd person out. You know, you always fight against the, you know, rules that people are coming up with, like, hey, don't do this because that's really bad for us collectively. And you're like, you know what? What if fuck you? I'm gonna do it anyway. You know, and you're just like constantly like, you know, contrarian, doing the opposite stuff of what people are recommending and thinking of what the group as a whole seems to be embodying as a need. It's like we need this collective to work incredibly well because we as humans are really crappy, really terrible at surviving individually. We're great at surviving as a group, you know, but quite, you know, if you look at a lot of other animals out or organisms out in the world, they tend to need some, you know, sometimes they tend to need some group dynamics, but a lot of times it's like they are just like rock stars at flying solo, you know, like I can get food completely on my own. I can make my own home. I can just be out just doing me stuff, and this is perfectly fine. In fact, if you put me in a group, it's a problem. We have that total opposite situation. Like you know, we're so frail and so fragile. We can't survive in extreme heat. We can't survive in extreme cold. And extreme for us is a way shorter window too. It's like we're really good in this like nice little narrow spot. You know, if you have this collective, you have some people that are, you know, like doing food stuff, some people that are doing some clothing stuff. Everybody's kind of looking out for each other. When one person falls ill, the rest of the people are helping them out. Whereas if you're flying solo, you fall ill, well, you're just dead now. You're just dead. Maybe you're just ill enough that you can't quite get down to the water to get some hydration. Well, you die in 3 days. Boom, you're just dead. That's just, it's quite different for us than it is for, a lot of other creatures. So part of this, and this is such a dumb explanation too. There's like way more than any of this. And I think anybody who knows their stuff would be like, yes, that's true. But you've completely missed and glossed over this other point. And as much as I made that voice, they're absolutely correct. Point I was making though, and I was trying to drive to with my very frail thinking, was there is a built-in need and desire to kind of accept and acquiesce to the perspectives and truths of others in the group. And you can get into these weird little eddies, right? These like the little whirlpools that there's not like a lot of motion. It's just like there's a river here, and then there's this little eddy off to the side where there's not much motion. It just kind of sits there. But this river's raging, and it's like, this is the same body of water. Why is this one not moving? You get into these weird little eddies where the group as a whole isn't necessarily thinking this opposite thing of reality, but every individual person is looking to the group to go like, what should I be thinking? What perspective should I be incorporating into myself so that I'm accepted by the group? Because this is just, hardwired into us. We need that acceptance so that we can survive. That was easily an evolutionary quality that came out, right? Like we were talking about. So you're like, everybody's looking to everybody else or to the group as a whole for this kind of confirmation. And one tiny little wrench that gets thrown into the system can cause this weird cascading effect where there's this like groupthink kind of a thing. Everybody is buying into this bizarre narrative that no individual actually thinks happened. But because of the weird little tricks of that need for looking to the outside, looking to the group for confirmation, and each person doing that, you accidentally stumble on this almost like creation of a narrative. How long is this video right now? 31 minutes? I love talking. One of my favorite things about miscommunication is when I say something and you hear it wrong, but it's a great idea, the thing that you heard. And the thing that I said was like, I like burgers. And the thing that you heard was, like, what if I create this masterwork of art that has this thing and that thing and is a social commentary for this thing, and then like uses these colors and has this particular composition in a certain way, such that it's just like absolute perfection. And it's like, that has nothing to do with what I just said. Of course, this is obviously a really crappy example, but this kind of stuff happens all the time, right? It's like, I'm in brainstorming meetings. I'll say something and somebody else is like, oh, that's a great idea because if we did this and then we did this, then, that could work really well. And I was like, hold on, that is not at all what I said. I said, what if I played, Super Paper Mario, and you heard, what if we put on this special, like, co-streaming event for this completely different game? And it turns out that the thing that you mishear is a brilliant idea. But who came up with it? I didn't come up with it because the thing that I said was different from what you heard. But you also didn't come up with it because you heard something from me. It is the creation of an idea that exists in between people. No person created the idea. It is a fluke of how communication works and how some of the psychological qualities just of being human manage to function. And I feel like the Mandela effect works in a similar way. You're looking for that social acceptance among people, and this is all among many other things, right? I'm just really dumbing this down, mostly for myself, because that's as far as I can think. And it's the in-between spots, where this misremembering almost happens, where it's like one person says a thing and another person hears something totally different. Everybody's looking for a confirmation of one thing and ends up seeing something slightly different because literally everybody's doing the exact same thing, and somehow that manages to cause this bizarre emergent quality. Great term for this. An emergent quality where the sum, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like schools of fish where there's no leader, but they still somehow manage to be following some kind of a trajectory, but they're not listening to one fish that's like, hey, everybody, let's go over here. Or like, oh, it's time to swim in a circle now and make this really big, like, mega donut in the ocean. Or flocks of birds that do this kind of stuff too, or like pack animal behavior. We have this idea of there being like one person who leads it, and sometimes that's true in certain circumstances, but for the most part, it's a collective behavior. Nobody's making the decisions. It's just it's an emergent property. Also consciousness, an emergent property. Where does consciousness sit? How does it start? Where does it begin? Where does it end? What are the things that create consciousness? We have no idea where any of those answers are. Nothing. And we have advanced this far technologically, philosophically, scientifically, and have no answers whatsoever. Not even a hint of an answer. Emergent qualities are things that just arise that don't seem to derive from their constituent parts. If you're making this food and you put this thing in, you put that thing in together, and you don't know how any of the science of it works. You're just like, I slam these things in together and boom, chemistry, and then out comes this delicious baked ziti. And they're like, that seems like an emergent property, but there is an underlying science to it. And that may well be true for things like the Mandela effect, that we just don't know how, and maybe we do know how this happens, but maybe we just don't know how some of these other emergent properties, like what it is that drives them to exist. But it seems like it's a lateral leap. It's like you have all these ingredients and you feel like they should make X. But what you end up getting is, instead of X, you get race car. And it's like, that has nothing to do with, what? Anyway, I should find an off-ramp. Where do babies come from? The internet. Who is someone you have not met but would love to? Jesus! Neil deGrasse Tyson would be cool. Bill Hicks? But he's wicked dead. Neil deGrasse Tyson would be cool. Can you share the story of dropping the roach in your crotch as mentioned during the movie night? I don't think it's a particularly interesting story. It is just as straightforwardly stupid as you would imagine. We were watching The Big Lebowski for the Patreon movie night, right? There's this one scene where Lebowski, the dude, he goes to like flick a roach. He's smoking a doobie, right? He's like smoking a joint. Goes to flick the roach out of the window, and he's like not exactly paying attention because he sees some other stuff going on, and it's like window's either like rolled up or partly rolled up or whatever, and he misses, and it just like bounces right into his crotch. He's like, oh, I actually legitimately beat on my own crotch right there. I don't know why, but it was realistically, it was about the exact same kind of situation. It's like for most people, and 100% for me, the shift that happens when you're, smoking the reefer, in a lot of cases, you stop paying attention to certain things and you can kind of dumb out. And this is absolutely me, right? It's like my mind's attention centers do not operate as they normally would. This is part of the point of smoking the weeds, is to get into a different mental state, right? Ideally, you're doing this because the different mental state is more enjoyable, more pleasant, or helps you function better, right? A lot of people who have anxiety find some benefit to doing this. I find it's the opposite, but, it can have that kind of calming and concentration effect. And for other people, it's like instead of concentrating and narrowing the field of concentration, it just like makes it way too wide and really thin. That's kind of a me thing, where I'm like jumping from one thing to the next and I'm stop paying attention to creating considering all the three things that I need to pay attention to right now. Two of them drop away and I only see one of them, because I'm also thinking about like why beaver tails are shaped the way that they are, and that the boat in the Suez Canal seems like it'd be easily fixable, but there are way more considerations to make than that, because I obviously have no idea how boating works, or shipping channels, or dredging dirt away from waterways and yada yada. And then I'm thinking about like, the effect of the panini with the the shipping stuff and how everything's so delayed. And then like there's that other thing that I ordered like 4 months ago and it still hasn't gotten here, and that totally makes sense why it hasn't gotten here. But there's this like whole ADD effect that starts happening, right? It's like this weird, like everything is happening in my head all at once. So nothing really important is happening in my head at all. And an important thing when you're smoking a doobie is, what are you going to do with that hot fire bit that's right at the end there? Well, for me, what I did with that hot fire bit was just throw it right into the closed window, right back into my crotch. and literally burned a hole both in the seat and in my pantaloon. Big fan. Although I will tell you a secondary story, and heads up for this one, you may want to shut off the video if you are a little squeamish about bodily function stuff. Some people are going to love this one though. I was taking a road trip, and this is dumb. Like, you shouldn't do this, but I was young and dumb, so it totally adds up. Taking a road trip, as I was wont to do sometimes, and I had to go to the bathroom really bad. And I was on this really long stretch of road, you know, that's often patrolled by state troopers and stuff. And it is not legal to pull off to the side of the road and piss on a fence. And everybody can see what's happening, right? It's not like it's lush forests. Like, it's Texas flat roadways. So I can't just like park the car on the you know, shoulder and then just like go off into the woods and piss, which is also still not legal. So instead, I had like a Mountain Dew bottle. I had a Mountain Dew bottle, and you'll never believe this. I didn't stop driving to piss into the Mountain Dew bottle. So I had one hand on the wheel. I may be misremembering this, but this is really clear in my memory. I don't know if I've told this story in like 8 different ways, but I had one hand on the wheel. I had unzipped my pants and I put my dick on the tip of the bottle, and I was pissing into the bottle while I was driving. And it turns out that there are curious factors. There are curious things that happen with pressure. So my penis head put a tight seal on the bottle, and then I peed into it, and it was filling up with pressure. And then I moved the bottle just a little bit, and the piss just sprayed all in my face. It was like SeaWorld with an orca just slapping a whole tidal wave, except it was my own hot urine. It was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, bye.